Good afternoon. Welcome to everybody who's joining us for today's Jewish Gen Talk. We will get started momentarily. We're glad that you're with us. Okay, welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here for today's Jewish Gen Talk. We have a wonderful presentation planned, continuing our series in researching Jewish families in America. I'd like to thank Ellen Coet, the director of our USA Research Division, for both organizing the series and specifically for organizing today's talk. Ellen is going to introduce our speakers and run the program, but just by way of introduction, I will mention that number one, you are welcome to ask questions. The panelists have agreed to take questions at the end. Thank you very much. You can post your questions in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen. Number two is this presentation is being recorded and will go on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it afterwards and also share it with friends and family as appropriate. And number three, I just wanted to mention that we are very mindful of what is happening in Israel, and our thoughts and prayers continue to be with our collective family who is there. One of our volunteers, I asked one of our volunteers if he had any family in Israel, and he immediately responded and he said, "Sure, I have 8 million." So we, as an organization that is focused on Jewish family history and heritage and trying to connect with relatives, are very mindful of the fact that we are part of one Jewish people. And to this end, we have decided that any money that comes in as a result of these programs, that any money that you have donated generously, and we appreciate it, as a response to organizing these programs, we are donating to the Barzilai Medical Center, which is located in Ashkelon in Israel in the south, near the front lines. And so for those of you who have donated, we appreciate your support. If you have not, we hope that you will consider doing so. With that, I thank you all for being here, and I will pass it over to Ellen Coet.
Thank you, Avrami, and thank you to JewishGen for allowing us this platform to get out speakers who we feel represent archives in America that need more introduction within the Jewish genealogy community, as there are a lot of resources, as they're each going to describe, that may help advance your family history. So today we're specifically talking about researching Jewish families with a focus on the Lake Erie region. We'll have archivists here from Cleveland, Detroit, and Pittsburgh, and the wider Western Pennsylvania area. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce Sean Martin, who is Ph.D. Curator for Jewish History at the Western Reserve Historical Society in Cleveland. Robbie Terman, who is Director of the Leonard and Simons Jewish Community Archives in Detroit, and Eric Lidji, Director of the Rauh Jewish Archives at the Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh. So welcome to you all, and Sean, you can take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be with you. And I just want to share my screen and I'll get started. And so I hope you can see that now. You are looking at a map of the Western Reserve, which is an old geographic name for Northeast Ohio. We were the Western Reserve of Connecticut, and that territory runs from the border with Pennsylvania about as far west as Sandusky and about as far south as Akron, or roughly we can just say Northeast Ohio. And so this is Western Reserve is an old regional name that has stuck with us. Western Reserve Historical Society is the local regional historical society, and it is an older private nonprofit, non-Jewish historical society founded in 1867 with a Cleveland Jewish Archives that was founded in the late 70s in 1976. So it's just about 50 years old. As a historical society, we are really many kinds of institutions at once. So we are a library and archives, which is a special collections library focused on local history. We are a museum, including an auto and aviation collection and a carousel. We are a living heritage museum with Hale Farm and Village at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and we have other historical properties as well. So the Cleveland Jewish Archives really is just one part of what we do here, but it's an important part, and it is already really a long established part of the work of the library. So the archives were founded in 1976 through a cooperation with the Historical Society and the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. You're looking at a photograph of the founders in 1976. That's our former library director, Kermit Pike, in the center, and to his left, Albert Ratner, and to his right, Bob and Sally Grease. Bob Grease of blessed memory he just died a week or so ago, a few days ago. The Grease family, the Ratner family, the Myers family here in the Cleveland area established the archives in 1976, and they're looking at one of the foundational documents of the community, the Allsbacher document that is an ethical will relating the history of the Jews of Unsleben, and they're coming to Cleveland in 1839. So we are really very proud that we have this foundational document and that we've been able to collect the history of the community since then. And it has been our charge since the founding of the archives to collect the materials related to local Jewish history. And that means that we collect materials from individuals, from organizations, from congregations, from businesses, from anyone really who has materials related to the Jewish history of the region. I should say that really as an organization that was really founded in cooperation with the Federation, and let me say a few more words about what that means specifically. What that means is that the Federation supports my position financially, and so it really is very much a community history position. I am an employee of the Historical Society, but I am working very closely with the community and everything that I do. You're looking at a photo of boxes that came in from the Siegel College of Judaic Studies, which closed around 2010, 2011. I am tasked with going out to organizations, individuals, again, anyone with relevant materials, and appraising those materials and bringing those materials in so that they can be used by researchers, which includes us in the preparation of our exhibits and our work, but also really genealogists, anybody doing their family research, community organizations, and the donors themselves who come back to use the materials for anniversary events and occasions of all different kinds. Once we bring these materials in, the next step really is to process these materials as professional archivists working with student interns, volunteers from the community. You're looking at a picture of a typical processor. I actually think this picture may come from the Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh. I think I took it from another PowerPoint. Eric, I don't know if you recognize that or not, but in any case, it is our task to go through those boxes that you saw to decide what we want, to arrange the other materials so that researchers can use them, and to make those materials available to the public. Once we've done that for these archival materials of all kinds, that includes papers, correspondence, naturalization certificates, family history documents, photographs, audiovisual materials of all different kinds, even now born digital records to a limited extent. Once we've done that, we create a finding aid that we put into our catalog online and into OhioLink, our statewide library system. And that catalog is available to anyone with an internet connection. And they can go into the catalog and they can see the finding aids for our collections. I should say that what they are seeing, I should make clear, what they are seeing are finding aids to the collection. They are not seeing the records as digitized. We're not digitizing as a matter of course, but they will find detailed lists of administrative records, membership and cemetery records, building and grounds records, education department records. This is an example from Anshe Hesed or Fairmount Temple, one of our largest and our oldest congregations. And so when they find records like this, then they know that they need to come and be in touch with us and access the records. I should also say that we have a digital repository. Digital Cleveland Starts Here, which is available from our website, WRHS.org. We primarily have materials there. We primarily have photographs there now, but we have also some documents. It's a collection that is growing as we're able to digitize. And I should say that we have a special digitization project underway. We are in about a year or so, we expect to complete the digitization of the records of Rabbis Abba Hillel Silver and Daniel Jeremy Silver, two prominent rabbis from the Temple Tifereth Israel here in Cleveland. These are very important collections. Abba Hillel Silver really is without doubt our most prominent Jewish leader to come out of Cleveland, prominent in the Zionist movement and the founding of the State of Israel. And so we expect those to be important, really both for international researchers and for anyone who had a connection to anyone in the congregation. They will be able to find materials there. Let me say just a few more things about the sorts of different cooperative relationships that we have and the work that we do. The Maltz Museum, formerly the Maltz Museum of Jewish Heritage, is our local Jewish Heritage Museum, founded in 2005. I started in the position here just after the Maltz Museum was founded. The Maltz Museum considers the Cleveland Jewish Archives at Western Reserve Historical Society a research partner, and its core exhibit, An American Story, tells the story of American Jewish history through Cleveland, and they rely on our collections for that exhibit. It's a very close collaborative relationship I have with the museum. I am not one of their staff, but I attend their staff meetings. I work with them in a number of ways to train volunteers. And in fact, we actually collect on behalf of the Maltz Museum. So if somebody actually goes to the museum and says, hey, we have something that we think you might be interested in collecting, that person will be referred to me. I should say we've also have a long record of publications on Jews in Cleveland. The oldest publication is The History of the Jews of Cleveland by Lloyd Gartner, published in '78, I believe. This is a one-volume history of the Jews of Cleveland, which it remains really very useful. We also published a photographic essay, Merging Traditions, Jewish Life in Cleveland. So that's a collection of photographs from the collection. Remembering Cleveland's Jewish Voices, a selection of primary sources from the archives. And then I also was asked to do a book on the garment industry here, A Stitch in Time. And along with John Grabowski, our chief historian here at the Historical Society, we put together a selection of scholarly essays on the Cleveland Jewish community, Cleveland Jews and the Making of a Midwestern Community. That's our latest one that just came out in 2020. A couple other things I should say. One of the projects I'm proudest of is the Soviet Jewish Oral History Collection. This is an oral history collection of about 80 interviews of Soviet Jews who came to Cleveland. The collection is available online, digitally, the recordings and the transcripts. And then, of course, also the transcripts are available in the archives. This was a project of the Cleveland Jewish Archives Advisory Committee, our local community members who assist us with our work. This was a project that they came up with, and they formed a subcommittee, and we worked to do these interviews in a very nice systematic way to collect these important stories. One of the collections we're also proudest of is the Cleveland Council on Soviet Anti-Semitism, the first such group of its kind in the United States to aid Soviet Jews. And we were able to tell the story of how American Jews were involved in the Soviet Jewish movement, but we hadn't really been able to tell the stories of Soviet Jews themselves. And so it was this collection that allowed us to do that. And then the next slide I have to show you is an unfortunate one, but I kind of can't avoid it because at the moment we are closed due to a recent fire at the end of September, so just about a month ago. And this was a localized fire to our library basement area. And really, we are fortunate to say that we did not lose any collections. What you're looking at is the greatest damage that we suffered really to supplies that this was our supply area. There were many boxes that were water damaged, but then we had extensive soot damage throughout the building, and all collections will need to be cleaned and rehoused. So we will be closed for about a year, but we will be working to, during that time, we will be working to inventory the collections, clean the collections, bring them back on site, and get them ready for researchers again. In the meantime, a lot of our work can continue in terms of digitization, in terms of outreach like this. And really, I'm also happy to answer email queries and help in whatever way I can with the resources that I have. Just a couple of other comments about the fire. For those of us, Robbie and Eric, who have to kind of think of these things professionally, think of them, really. Think of your disaster plans. They're really quite important. Think of the staffing that you have in place now to help you with all these sorts of things, because all those questions really are very important. And then really the last thing that I'll leave you with is that that really what events like this do is they really stress the importance of our preserving the materials as carefully as we can in many different ways, including digitally. So thanks so much. I think I've already spoken for too long, and I look forward to learning about the other collections.
You're not speaking too long, so thank you, Sean. We appreciate it. I am going to ask each of you, when you get a chance, to put your email addresses or the best way to contact each of you or your repositories into the chat. There is not a handout for this particular session, so that would be one way people could follow up and ask any questions that aren't answered today. So with that, Robbie, you're up next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Robbie Terman. I am the director of the Leonard and Simons Jewish Community Archives, which is a department of the Jewish Federation of Detroit. We collect, preserve, and make available the records of Jewish Detroit and the personal papers of Detroit's Jewry. Our collection includes more than 2 million documents, over 60 collections, more than 25,000 photographs. We have an extensive oral history collection, and we also are continuously recording oral histories. And especially of interest to you is we maintain a cemetery index of the Michigan Jewish cemeteries, which has recorded more than 65,000 burials in Detroit's Jewish cemeteries. A few years ago, we partnered with the Rabbi Leo M. Franklin Archives at Temple Beth El. And I'm actually sitting in Temple Beth El right now. Temple Beth El is Detroit's oldest synagogue, founded in 1850, and of course still exists today. Their archive holds the organizational and congregational records of Temple Beth El and its members, and includes documents, photographs, audio recordings, and other materials that trace their Jewish social and cultural history of Michigan. And they also hold the records of the Jewish war veterans of Michigan, which is a really wonderful collection. So our partnership with the Franklin Archives started a few years ago. We started doing some programming together. We actually, our offices, my office used to be at the Jewish Federation of Detroit, which is less than a mile from here of Temple Bethel. So we were so close together. We have very similar collections. So we just kind of started doing some programming together. We started doing a little bit of social media together. And then we went for a grant and were able to combine our digital database into one digital database. And this past March, we achieved our years-long dream of combining into one physical space. So both of our collections are now housed in one physical space, which is creating a one-stop hub for researchers. We have both the digital space and now the physical space that a researcher can come into and access both of our collections, one spot. Before this, my collection was in two locations 20 miles apart. So a researcher who wanted to come and learn about the history of Jewish Detroit and Jewish Michigan would have to potentially go to 3 locations pretty far away from each other. Now we have a very comprehensive collection here in one location. Now, if you are not in the Metro Detroit area, but you have ancestors who are from this area and you want to do a little digging, we've got you covered. We've got a lot of digital resources for you to play around with. So what I would like to do now is share my screen and show you how to use some of those resources. Okay, so this is our website. It's mijewishheritage.org. Now you're going to see right away, it says Joan Myers Jampel, Center for Michigan Jewish Heritage. Well, when we partnered up with the Franklin Archives, we wanted to come up with kind of an umbrella name for our partnership. So that is the Joan Myers Jampel Center for Michigan Jewish Heritage. What that is basically, as I said, our umbrella name for the Simons Archive and the Franklin Archives collaboration. So what you get on this website is access to both our websites. And I want to just point out a few things on both of our sites. So if you scroll through our sites, you're going to see our 2 organizations, the Franklin Archives, the Simons Archives. You can go to our individual websites because we both do have individual websites. It is through the Simons Archive site that you're going to find the cemetery index that I talked about. So I want to pop onto that for just one moment. So this is our Michigan Irwin Icahn Michigan Jewish Cemetery Index. And it is a record, as I said, about 65,000 burial records. Now it goes from about the mid 1800s to 1999. So it doesn't really have a lot of the last 20 or so years. And I will talk about that more in a moment. But I just want to show you, really, it's a very easy site to use. We do ask that you create a login, but it's free. It's a free resource. All you have to do is put in a name, and it's going to tell you the cemetery they're buried at, and then whatever information that the cemetery gave us, which is not consistent, unfortunately. Obviously, we always hope that they give us the actual location of the cemetery, the row number, the plot number, all of that. Not every cemetery does, but we get as much information as we can. If date of death or date of birth, anything they can give us is going to be here. Now, another great resource on this is Locate a Cemetery. And if you are searching for burials, I highly recommend this because a lot of times when you're looking for where someone is buried, one way you can figure that out is when was the cemetery opened? You know, if the person died in 1915, but the cemetery didn't open in 1920, you know that's not where they're buried, right? If you go here, we're going to have as much information as we can about the cemetery, including the founding date. So, and the location. So this list of cemeteries in the greater Detroit area is going to be very helpful for your genealogy research. Now, I mentioned that this only goes to about 1999. A couple of reasons for that. Cemeteries can be very proprietary about information. Sometimes they don't feel comfortable sharing it. A lot of cemeteries now are doing their own. They're doing their own websites and their own cemetery indexes. So they're not interested in sharing with us because they want people to go on their site. So sometimes a good way, if you're not finding things current, is to look at our list of cemeteries and then go right to their cemetery web address to see if they have their own index up. So that's just kind of a little trick. Now I want to go back now to our website, the Center for Michigan Jewish Heritage, the Browse the Archives Catalog button. This is where you're going to find a lot of the information that we have in our archives. This is going to take you to our digital database. And there's many ways to search. Of course, one way is always just trying to look up someone's name. So you can always do a search by someone's name and you might get a hit on it, which is great. Now, the wonderful thing about our digital database is that you are going to find both of our collections, both the Simons and the Franklin Archives collections. And how you will tell the difference is where it says TBE, that's Temple Bethel, FED is Federation or the Simons. And that's going to tell you who you need to contact for more information. If you scroll to the bottom, it's going to tell you the email of the person based on the prefix. So if you know, okay, my family is the Shapiro family, and I see you have a family file on them. This is going to tell you who to contact to get more information. It depends. Every collection is a little bit different, where you can look onto the guide and see people maybe who are mentioned in the collection or an actual list of what's in the collection. This is all going to depend on the collection itself. We also have, as I said, thousands and thousands of photographs. Let's say you see this and you said, that's my family, I'd love a copy of it. All you have to do is click on the photo and click request an image, and we can help you out with that. So it's a pretty easy way to kind of navigate our website. Now, the thing about archives is that it's not as easy as Googling someone. Yes, I just Googled Nate Shapiro and we found some results, and that's wonderful. But the truth is, this is a fraction of what we have on this man and this family. A large part of our collection is not digitized yet. We are always working on it, but it's a really time-consuming and expensive process. So the archivists are the experts in these collections. So always, if you see something, it's a great idea to still contact the archivist and tell them what you're looking for, tell them the person or the organization, and see if they have anything offline that you won't be able to see online, because there might be a lot more. And I think that personally for me, that's the fun part. That's kind of the history detective part of this kind of research. Now, another thing we have on here is our finding aids. We have most of the finding aids for our collections, which is the guides to our collections. So let's just say you know that your grandmother was a past president of the National Council of Jewish Women Detroit branch, and you wonder if we might have any records on her. What you'd want to do is find the guide to that collection, and we have our finding aid. You can download it, you can look through it. The actual documents are not going to be here, but you will be able to see if we maybe have any information, and again, contact us and we can help you out from there. So the great thing too about the website is I think you can find a lot too just about the area. Sometimes in genealogy research, it's not just finding out about a particular person, but it's also about really finding out about the area in which they lived in. So if you go through this website, you're going to really find a lot out about the Detroit Jewish community. So the Jewish Federation, of which this is a department, started in 1899, but we do have collections that predate that. And as I said, we are also partnered with the Franklin Archives, which dates back to 1850. So, and they even have a few collections that predate that. So to really understand the Detroit Jewish community, there are tons of different things you can find on this website, including more than 100 oral history interviews with people, with leaders from our community throughout a generation. We also have a number of film from different eras on here. So there really is a treasure trove. You can explore random images on this tab and just look through and get a sense for what this community is like. Now, I think we have so many wonderful resources here, but of course we are not the only place in this area where you can find resources to understand the Detroit Jewish community. So I want to share a few more that could be really helpful on your own personal genealogy journey. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about death records because I mentioned, of course, our Irwin Icahn Michigan Jewish Cemetery Index, which there's the web address. That's the direct one, cemetery.jewishdetroit.org. But of course, there's also a link if you go onto our site from the MI Jewish Heritage site as well. But one of the wonderful other places that you can sometimes find genealogy information is through the funeral homes. Well, here in Detroit, we basically only have 3 local Jewish funeral homes. So everything really comes out of these 3 organizations, these 3 funeral homes. They have a wonderful history, wonderful amounts of information as well, can help you find burials. Hebrew Memorial and Ira Kaufman have been around for a very long time. Dorfman's is the youngest at opening in 2001. If you do any research in Detroit genealogy, you are definitely going to see the name Lewis Brothers. Unfortunately, their records were lost to a fire many years ago. I hate to disappoint you on that, but that's unfortunately a funeral home that records really don't exist for anymore. Another site that is wonderful for looking at death records, and as well as many other records, is at the Library of Michigan and the Archives of Michigan, which is for the entire state of Michigan. Their site is called michiganology.org. You can find death certificates from very early on to about 1952. So if you are looking for burial information, looking for death certificates of a person who died in Michigan, whether they are Jewish or not, that is going to be a great resource for that. Now, some other great local resources. So if your family was from Michigan and you want to know, maybe they had a business, and maybe you want to see more about the street where they lived on, maybe you want to see city directories, things like that. So some of the resources that you might want to check out are the Burton Historical Collection, which is located within the main branch of the Detroit Public Library. And it's a repository that emphasizes the history of Detroit and Michigan from the settlement in the 17th century to the present. And I have to say, the Burton is one of my happy places. It's so much fun to explore. They have city directories going back pretty much since I think the beginning that they started doing city directories in Detroit, which gives you incredible genealogical information. They have wonderful information, photographs, stuff on businesses, and so many other things. So it's a great resource. The Detroit Historical Society is another wonderful resource. They have a wonderful online digital database with so many images of historic Detroit. And they also are what feeds the several museums, including the Detroit Historical Museum. I also want to mention the Reuther Library of Labor and Urban Affairs, which is on the campus of Wayne State University in Detroit. They hold labor history, union history, and they also hold urban history. And one of the collections that they hold is photographs from the Detroit News, which is one of our local newspapers. So it's wonderful. If I get so many requests from people who are trying to find historic images, and So these are great resources, really filling in for the Save Detroit, which is oftentimes outside of our focus of focusing solely on the Jewish community. I also want to mention the Jewish Genealogical Society of Michigan. This is our local genealogy society. It's a wonderful organization, volunteer-led, but they are so talented in digging up information. They offer there's so many people who can offer so much feedback and ideas and help people out, and they're so willing to do it. That's their website, jgsmi.org. You can always also reach out to them. I know they always want to help anyone that they can. And they hold a lot of their genealogy resources at the Zekelman Holocaust Center. Our local Holocaust Center is another wonderful resource. Now, they, of course, focus on European and Holocaust history, but of course, as many of our own ancestry goes back to that, it really is a wonderful resource. And it also holds several collections of local Landsmannschaften groups. So again, if your ancestors were involved in a Landsmannschaften here in Detroit, that might be a collection you might want to look at the Holocaust Center. And their librarian archivist there is one of the most knowledgeable women I have ever met in my life, and she is a wonderful, wonderful treasure of information. And a search on your ancestors in Detroit would not be complete unless you visit the Detroit Jewish News Archive. This is their web address. It is now held by the Bentley Library at the University of Michigan. So if you go to digital.bentley.umich.edu.dj news, I know it's a little bit long, but the Detroit Jewish News is our local newspaper, Jewish newspaper. It was founded in 1942, still exists today. But it had a precursor called the Detroit Jewish Chronicle that started in 1916 and ran to 1952. So they have on this site all the issues going back from 1916 to present. And I have to tell you, if your ancestor lived in Detroit, we will be hard pressed not to find at least one mention of them in the Jewish news. It's almost impossible not to find someone mentioned at least once. It works so wonderfully with our archive because, as I said, we're not Google. You can't always just type in a name and you're going to just pull up everything that we have. You really have to do some digging. So if you don't know a lot about your ancestor and you have no idea where to start digging, this is a good first site to try going on the Jewish News Archive. If you find you're looking up your great-grandmother and you find out she was part of Hadassah and she was active, and you have some dates when she was involved. And then you find out she went to a Dat Shalom synagogue. And then you find out that she was part of the women's division at the Jewish Federation. And then you come to us and tell us these are the organizations she's involved with and the dates. And then we have all those collections and we can help and see if now we can find your ancestor in our collections. So this is going to be a wonderful resource to get started in your journey. Our website right there again, mijewishheritage.org. I'll put this in the chat also, but info@mijewishheritage.org is how you can reach us with any of your questions. I'm always happy to answer questions and kind of help people lead them through their genealogy journey. Thank you all so much. And I'm gonna, take off the share, stop the share there. Oh, there we go. So thank you all so much.
All yours, Eric.
All right, thank you. So today is actually a special day for the Rauh because we were founded on November 1st. And so today is our 35th birthday today. It just so happens. But we actually had a little bit of a history before that. There was about 20 years of efforts in Pittsburgh to create something that we would call an archive today that just never quite panned out, but produced some really interesting stories. It started back in 68 and 69 when these two Jewish guys who were in the history department at the University of Pittsburgh, they learned that the university had gotten its first computer, and they had this idea to collect all of the records of the community and put it into this computer. They couldn't get any support for it at the time. If they had, it would be this incredible resource that we have today, assuming that they migrated the information correctly. But it kind of shows things that didn't pan out, and also kind of the way that these projects start in their early days. I went to the University of Pittsburgh one day and I found a printout of the inventory they were making. It's a fascinating document because it's such a relic of a particular time. It has almost no relevance today. It tells you where these documents were located within particular synagogues 50 years ago. So it's not a useful document, but it's an interesting document. The archive as we know it today really got started in 1987 when the Federation partnered with what was then called the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania to fund an initiative called the Jewish Archival Survey. And the idea was that we would hire an archivist for 1 year to go to every Jewish organization in the community and just find out what they had. And this would serve two functions. One is it would be kind of a feasibility study to see if there was enough material to justify an archive. And the other is that it would be kind of a grassroots organizing effort. So it would, by the end of this process, everybody knew that we were doing this. Something that had never occurred to me, Sean, until you were talking, is that the head of our federation at that time was Howard Rieger, who was the director of operations at the Cleveland Federation in the 70s. And I sort of wonder if he watched that process in Cleveland and then brought it to Pittsburgh. This was the sheet that he took to each of these organizations on the left there, and then a page from his inventory on the right. And I always think these are interesting because as you look at these inventories and you look at what's in the archive, you can see just how easy it is for records to kind of disappear over time. We have the records of each of these three congregations that are listed here, but they're not quite exactly the same as what's listed. So it's somewhere along the way over the years, just things go missing, and that's why archives are so important. So the archive was finally founded on November 1st, 1988, and this is a little piece from our internal newsletter, and it has this photograph showing the first artifact that was donated to the archive. And I love this artifact because if you look at it, it's from the Workman's Circle. If you look at the word Workman's, you can see there's an odd little glyph at the end there. And if you look really closely, it's an E stitched on top of an A. And I've always assumed that they couldn't decide whether it was Workman's Circle or Workmen's Circle. And so they just made it both. So since then, since November 1st, 1988, we've really grown tremendously. We have about 1,500 collections in the archive. Those collections we try to cover the entire diversity of the Jewish community. So we have about 50 or more congregational collections that cover all of Western Pennsylvania. We have organizational collections that include the major organizations that most large Jewish communities have, like the Federation, our Jewish Community Center, our Hebrew Free Loan Association, our local Jewish newspaper, Home for the Aged, one of our Jewish orphanages, as well as many organizations that either don't exist anymore or don't exist here anymore, or kind of merged in some way. So we have the Workman's Circle records, we have records of Hadassah and Naamat, and an organization that was particular here called the Pittsburgh Conference of Jewish Women's Organizations, which was kind of an umbrella group for Jewish women's groups and sisterhoods. We have several hundred family collections, and these are families that range from kind of the founding fathers of the community to regular families that contain some material that seems to illuminate a corner of local Jewish history. And then we have research collections as well. These are collections that are often created by local historians, or sometimes they're amateur historians, sometimes professional, sometimes they're working community-wide, sometimes on one particular thing. And these collections are a really useful place to start when you're looking for materials. So I want to talk a little bit about strategy, and somewhat I'm going to mention are things that Sean and Robbie have mentioned as well. The internet has been this incredible tool for genealogists. It's allowed so many more people into genealogy. if you've ever talked to people who did genealogy before the internet, you know that it was a very different undertaking when you had to go search out census schedules or flip through physical copies of newspapers. And so it's really amazing that so many people can participate, but it has trained people to look for information in a certain way. And that way of looking for information is not always helpful when you're looking at physical records. So what I always recommend to people is to use the digital tools that you have available to you to create a plan that helps you pursue things in the physical collections. So when I do research for people or when I'm advising people, I always tell them to kind of start with these basic tools. So there's ones that are useful for everybody, like the census schedules and city directories. And then there's some that are local to our area, which I'll go through. And these include Historic Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Jewish Newspaper Project, the Jewish Encyclopedia of Western Pennsylvania, and then the tools that you're accustomed to, like Find a Grave, newspapers.com, and ancestry.com. So this is our newspaper project. Sean and Robbie both talked about theirs. Ours is created through a collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University. It includes 4 newspapers. The Jewish Criterion was our first English language Jewish newspaper. It was founded in 1895. It got a competitor in 1934 called the American Jewish Outlook. Our federation bought both of those papers in 1962 and merged them into a new independent publication called the Jewish Chronicle, which still publishes today. And then our JCC, previously it was a Y, published its own newspaper for about 50 years. And so this is a fully searchable online free tool that allows you to search these newspapers. The search engine has some limitations to it. And so we have a video on our website that kind of explains some strategies for using this. And I always tell researchers, if you're having trouble finding your ancestor, just to give me a call and I can give you a 10-minute walkthrough that'll make it a lot easier for you. So this is the kind of document that I would make if I was researching a particular individual using all those tools I just mentioned. So I've got the name of the person, the year of the record, and then whatever information, address, what their profession was, what sort of affiliations they might have. And just from this sheet, you can already look at 3 or 4 different places you might look for information. So there's a congregation here, Tree of Life. There's an organization, the YM and WHA. These addresses, if you live in Pittsburgh, you'll know that none of these are in major Jewish neighborhoods. So that gives you a hint as well that this person was living kind of in one of the smaller Jewish neighborhoods. And just this exercise alone very much narrows down where we would look to find more information about your ancestor. This is an example of the type of thing you might find using the newspapers and using Find a Grave. So recently I was researching this person named Joseph Richman. I found this very helpful obituary. I happened to notice in the obituary that it's mentioned that he's buried at this cemetery, Makziki Hadass. But in actuality, if you look on Find a Grave, he's actually at a completely different cemetery. So all this information is helpful. It gives us 2 or 3 places to look. And when we go to the congregation that he had founded, as it was saying here, we find that his name appears all over those records. So I want to go through some of these in a little bit more detail and kind of show you how to use some of these tools. One of the challenges I found in Western Pennsylvania, I get the sense that it's also the case in Cleveland and Detroit, but it seems to be a worse situation here in Pittsburgh, is that things are often very decentralized. And you may have to do the same search in multiple places in order to cover all your bases. So, for instance, to start with online catalogs, to make this somewhat easier, we created a tool on our website that lists all the major repositories that have materials having to do with Jewish life in Western Pennsylvania. So you can see here, there's 6 repositories. Some of them are here in Pittsburgh and some of them are not. For each of these repositories, we have a brief essay on what it is, just what the repository is, how you access it, what are the hours, and then how to use it. So just for the History Center alone, there are 4 or 5 different search engines that cover different parts of what the Heinz History Center, which is where I'm based, what we offer. And sometimes you need to do these searches in multiple places just to make sure you're covering everything. This is our regular catalog, just the kind of first stop that I recommend for anybody doing research. So before we were looking at that person who had gone to this congregation, Machziki Hadass. And when you type in that congregation, you see that there are 2 or 3 collections that come up. And as everyone previously was mentioning, you're not going to necessarily get digitized materials, but you'll get a catalog record and a finding aid that will help you figure out if the collection is going to be useful to you, and then be able to make a really targeted request to the archive. This is a piece of one of our finding aids. Just a finding aid is a little bit more of a detailed look at a collection. I sometimes have described it to people as a combination of a table of contents, an abstract, and an index. So for a book, you would expect to see all those things in a book. This just kind of brings all those things together in one place. Our finding aids are hosted on a website called Historic Pittsburgh, which I'll explain in a little bit. And it allows you to kind of look at information down to the box and folder level. So you can see for this particular one, if you happen to know that the individual you were looking for died in 1920, then you would maybe find some of these membership ledgers useful because they cover that time period. And in fact, this is kind of what you would find if you were to go to the collection itself. So here's a membership page that lists this person. It gives some of the addresses where he lived. It shows the years that he was a member. And now that allows you to narrow down your search even more. So I mentioned before Historic Pittsburgh. This is a regional collaboration that is hosted by the University of Pittsburgh, and it includes collections from about a dozen repositories in the region. The 2 largest are the University of Pittsburgh and the Heinz History Center, but there's a lot of smaller ones that provide some great materials as well. This is where all these organizations host their finding aids, but there's also tens of thousands of digitized materials on this website. It's also really useful because it has Hopkins maps. So these are fire insurance maps that show neighborhoods down to the building. They're very useful if you have an address and you just want to see what things looked like back then, or as sometimes is the case, cities get redeveloped and those streets don't even exist anymore. It's a really helpful way of looking at the changes in physical structure of a city over time. We also have city directories on this site for Pittsburgh and for the city of Homestead. And these go back to some of the earliest directories that were published. And then we have a huge book collection as well. So it's a really wonderful resource. The only problem is that the catalog record that I showed you before and this website are not complete mirrors of each other. So you really do have to do sometimes the same search in 2 places. Now I want to mention our website, the Jewish Encyclopedia of Western Pennsylvania. This is a website that we've had for a while, but we sort of rebranded it and relaunched it at the beginning of last year. And the idea is finding aids are really useful and professional researchers are very comfortable with them, but sometimes the general public has a little bit of a hard time with them. Additionally, as I mentioned, there's all these records in all these different places. And so the idea behind this website is that for any subject that has some research interest to it, we create an entry and we give a little bit of historical background, and then we provide a bibliography of all the known repositories that have information about this particular subject. And then we provide a small selection of digitized materials as well. So for example, this is an entry we recently put up for the city of Canonsburg, which is a small town in Western Pennsylvania. And you can see it gives you some important dates, locations. It tells you about the auxiliary organizations in that town. It also includes a list of all the families, the known Jewish families in that town, population statistics, a very complex, comprehensive bibliography that tells you all the collections that we have, the collections that are in other repositories, and then digitized materials from what we have available. So for this one, we happen to have a small selection of, but a really wonderful selection of photographs from this particular community. We also have our cemetery database on this website. So our current database has about 50,000 burials from 78 Jewish cemeteries. One of the defining features of Jewish Pittsburgh is that it is very decentralized. So there were hundreds of small Jewish communities in this region, and many of them had their own cemeteries, and it's taken a lot of years and a lot of driving to collect all these records. This cemetery database kind of reached its conclusion in 2009, and so we're in the process now of kind of refreshing it a little bit. So we're this is something that actually nobody has seen before, but we're in the process of recollecting the data, adding in Hebrew names where they weren't put in before, adding photographs where they weren't put in before, and arranging our data according to the same specs as JewishGen, just so that the two databases match up a little bit. And because it's hosted on this website, we're also able to link back to other information in the website. So for this is from a congregation in DuBois, Pennsylvania, and we can link back to our entry on DuBois and then particular family entries if we have those as well. We also recently have been working on our yard site plaque database, working with JewishGen on that as well. We've currently got about 3,000 listings from, I would say, 12 to 14 organizations, and we have a backlog of about 20,000 plaques that we're working through with volunteers right now. And then we also have a weekly newsletter where we announce new updates to the website. We put up at least one new entry on the website every week, and this newsletter is the easiest way to learn what new information is going up on the website. We also put a lot of fun stories and photographs and things like that on there. Then there's Shul Records America. This is Ellen's project that she recently did, and it's helpful, even if you're doing all the stuff that I've talked about. I think it's still helpful to go to this website because we made sure to put every synagogue record that we have here, even if they're not in the catalog yet, and even if they're not on our website yet. So no matter what you do, I think you should also go to this website to check to see if we have records from the organization you're looking for. And then finally, I want to talk about our local archivist society here in Pittsburgh called Three Rivers Archivists. They put together their own collection of all the known repositories in the region. A lot of these won't be useful at all for Jewish genealogy, but you never know if the ancestor you're looking for happened to intersect with the museum or one of the universities or some other organization. This is just a way to see who has collections in this area. And then I always tell people to not be afraid of contacting local historical societies. In Western Pennsylvania, as I said, people were spread across a large area. Each of these counties and towns has their own historical societies. Oftentimes they have directories that are not available anywhere else, or they're doing genealogical research that is specific to their area. And they have high school yearbooks, things like that. So it's just always a very helpful tool as well. And then the last thing I would say before I finish is, if you're not accustomed to doing archival research, it can sometimes be a little bit scary to kind of come and look at a collection for the first time. And I would say the equivalent is like the difference between driving somewhere on the highway and taking back roads, but the back roads are where the interesting stuff is. So I would encourage you to just go to an archive sometime, a Jewish one or a not Jewish one, and just spend a little time looking through collections and kind of see what it's like to look at something without necessarily knowing what it is, and to get comfortable with it. Because if you do your own research, you're always going to find more material than somebody else doing that research for you. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone. I'd just like to kind of summarize that when working with archives, users are, it's helpful to understand the way archives are different from libraries, and that most materials at an archive will be cataloged at a folder or a box level, not necessarily at an item level like you would think a book would be in a library. And this is why when you search through some of these online catalogs that each of these organizations hold, you won't necessarily find your name. And that's why every time you look at an archive, you should be doing the next step and sending an email inquiry, as I think Robbie and Eric and Sean pointed out, asking about a family, because it's possible that there are other finding aids to guide you in finding a specific family that you won't see online in their catalog. There's also a lot of material that comes into these archives, and a lot of it hasn't been cataloged. Sometimes archives have small staffs, and so not everything is up. So you should also send an email asking about what they might have that isn't cataloged yet. So that's just a little bit of advice. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. I would like to give a little pitch. Thank you, Eric, for showing Shul Records America. I don't think we'll have time to demonstrate that, but it is a project available on JewishGen through the USA Research Division. It is growing exponentially as more and more repositories are identified that hold congregational records with genealogical value. Both Sean and Eric have given us itemized lists of everything in their collections, and so we have all of those included in Shul Records America. I looked up, Robbie, we do have a few from Detroit, but we're going to work together and add any others that the two of us can find. And if any of our viewers are aware of where there might be synagogue records at a local library or a non-Jewish repository or in the possession of an existing synagogue, please get in touch with us and we will add them. So with that, that's all I have of Rami, unless any additional questions have come in. Do you have anything?
No, I think we are ready to wrap up. We're at the 3 o'clock mark. Thank you very much, Sean, Eric, and Robbie. This was really very informative. Thank you, Ellen, for organizing it. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. Please be on the lookout for the video. When it's recorded, we'll send out a notice about it. And please be on the lookout for information about future Jewish Gen Talks throughout the fall. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.